probably took a sip of water maybe about a few seconds ago, maybe right now, like what I just did. But why are you even drinking water in the first place? Why is clear liquid so important for us? Well, because it's water. See, it's simple. In order to digest food, you're going to have acid, and acid is a liquid. The only thing that can create an acid is this type of liquid, which is called water. It is a basic life form for everything. It contains oxygen and hydrogen. We'll talk about that right now. Now, the bond between one oxygen and two hydrogens is something that we should celebrate, because together they create this lovely stuff. But there's only one problem. If you just do that, then it's just going to be water molecules just floating in the air. Vapor. I'll get into that later. So how do you turn vapor, which is everywhere? If it's humid, then vapor. If you're taking a shower, vapor. Well, technically liquid, but if it's a warm shower, then vapor will come up. If you're in a sauna, vapor. How do you turn this piece of invisible air you can't even feel into liquid forms? And how can you turn liquids into solids? And I'll talk about ice later. Now, water has something called hydronic bonds, which allows the hydrogen and oxygen to connect with each other. Now, the oxygen just like, I need those electrons now! So it has a slight negative charge because it always has a negative attitude. Don't be a negative Nazi, and also don't cut anybody's heads off because that's going to be bad. That's usually what's associated with negative Nazi. Don't be that type of negative Nazi. Don't be any type of negative Nazi, actually. So, and the hydrogen is like, electrons. I want it, but I get to kill for them. Meanwhile, oxygen is like, So yeah, you can probably tell the difference. Therefore, hydrogen is positive and oxygen is negative. So, as the oxygen wants more electrons, it cannot exactly grab down on the V-shaped combination that is water, which includes two hydrogens and one oxygen, as you probably know. H2O, everybody loves that word. Well, most of you do. If you like drinking soda for the rest of your life, drink this for now. So, the hydrogen connects with another water molecule onto the other water molecule's oxygen molecule. Why? Because the oxygen wants more electrons. If it hits another oxygen, it creates something that is very not digestible and very not good for you. I don't want to talk about that because it's kind of a poison and it is very illegal to talk about. You probably know what I'm talking about. I'm just not going to say it because it's basically Voldemort. Okay. So, as it connects, more and more starts connecting, as the energy draws more and more and more and more water molecules towards each other until you get this. Now, something that you probably have not noticed yet. You see this? Those are beads. Why do they bead? Well, exactly because of this. Whenever they bead, they go onto a surface and then they clump up together into a little ball. That is created because of the hydrogen and oxygen bonds bonding with other hydrogen and oxygen bonds. This is called a hydronic bond, and you should really, really focus on that. If you have a test coming up for you younger people, which is probably like 0% of my viewers, I don't know why that is. If you have any sort of test about oxygen and biology and stuff, and they ask you what is the most important things about water, talk about the hydronic bonds, because that's what makes this to this. Cheers. Something else about it is that water is the best at dissolving things. It isn't the best, but it's not universal. Everybody calls it the universal solvent for some reason. It's not universal, but it sure is pretty good. There are only a few things which are called something which has phobia at the end, because it literally says water afraid protons. Whenever you put it in, it comes up. For example, something that would mix with water would be Coca-Cola or orange juice or milk. I'm not sure why you would mix milk with water, you dingies, but I don't know, it's you. I don't care what you are, whatever you do, but just don't do that. It's gross. But then there are other things, like liquid nitrogen. Liquid nitrogen, if you pour it on, it might look the same, but if you check the temperature so that you can see the difference, because liquid nitrogen is extremely cold and water is like, depending what the room temperature is, you look at it and they're not bonding. Why are you not bonding? Well, that's because the chemicals are too different and the oxygen cannot bond with the molecules that create liquid nitrogen. And that is why it cannot connect to nitrogen or anything like that. Also, don't drink nitrogen or like eat solid nitrogen. That is just not, it's not good, anybody. It's not good, everyone. That's a poison. It's included in chlorine. Like 70% of chlorine gas is nitrogen. That is my best academic guess. Ice. Now we know that it can turn into vapor, and it can also turn into a liquid. But it can also turn into a solid, making it the only material on Earth to appear naturally in both solid, liquid, and gaseous forms. And I think that's pretty important. We need water in our atmosphere so that it can neutralize deadly things. For example, like chlorine, because there's been a lot of chlorine still sitting in the air. And probably in 2030, Yellowstone will leave a lot of bad stuff inside the air. And water molecules shut them down. But it's still pretty bad for you to swallow a mouthful of dust. Don't do that, okay? So how come it can become ice? Hey, stop. Imagine this. If you take something like Coke and you freeze it and you put it into water, and the Coke ice cube goes to the bottom. If you take a stone, put it in water, it goes to the bottom. Put ice, put it in water, and it floats. Floats! Oh! It floats, everyone! That is amazing. It can float. Every other solid becomes light. It's the opposite of that. Let me tell you why. When it spaces up, when there are enough water molecules around, they will start putting itself in a specific pattern, which makes it less dense than all the other solids. For example, the ground we walk on, our teeth, ourselves, and all those things. And I think that's pretty important. Now, something that I'd really like to tell you is, you see, whenever you put ice inside a cup and you wait for a long time, it melts. I wonder why. How come Coca-Cola ice doesn't melt as quickly as water ice? I'll tell you why. Water has a very high heat capacity. So if you put ice in it for storage, and if you try to melt it down, that won't work. So you won't be able to drink it. But if water actually had a high heat capacity, like what it is right now, it would melt and become normal water, which sustains all life forms. And that is the reason why you can find water everywhere, even in the background of some YouTube video that you might be watching at this moment. I don't see any water though. I don't know if you have better vision than me. So the high heat capacity allows ice to melt into water, which is the reason why if you put ice in a cup and you wait for a few days and then you drink it, you don't, have solids pour into your mouth, and that's the reason why you don't need to chew whenever you drink water. It's just really dumb. You don't need to chew it. It's a liquid. Unless you want to break the hydrogen bonds and make it disgusting or anything. So, in conclusion, I'd say water is probably the most important thing on Earth. Without it, we won't be able to digest a thing. We won't be able to aid our minds. I did not mention, but water contains oxygen. When you put it in, it gets carried by the red blood cells into your bloodstream and goes into your heart. So, no water means no. That's pretty important because if there's snow, then you're probably going to be dead because there's no blood circulating through your body. The water is the most important thing on Earth. It appears naturally in all three forms: solid, liquid, and gas. And most importantly, it is the most common liquid on our planet. It is a universal solvent. And you probably will find it somewhere nearby. So let's celebrate this magical property, which is a property for those conspiracy theorists out there. This is a thing. And let's celebrate it by drinking a hefty dose of all of this water. And I'm going to drink all of it as we find another video to click on. Like and subscribe to me and water. Oh God, I'm choking.